Welcome to the 700 Club. Runaway inflation is taking its toll on the economy. Americans are cutting back on spending, and credit card debt has now reached record highs.
Almost half of economists surveyed say a recession is likely in the next 12 months. The administration disagrees, saying it's not inevitable. Dale Hurd brings us the details.
With inflation now at 8.6% and food prices rising the fastest in 40 years, Americans are trying to find ways to get by, and that means less spending.
It's really kind of tough, because you want to have everything provided, but everything is so high.
I'm dipping in savings so that I can live.
Credit card debt, which dipped during the pandemic as Americans used government stimulus checks to pay down balances, has rebounded to all-time highs. As Americans tighten their belts and close their pocketbooks, it puts even more downward pressure on the economy, pushing it toward recession. Almost half of economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal say a recession is likely in the next 12 months. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen still insists a recession is not inevitable.
Clearly, inflation is unacceptably high. It's President Biden's top priority to bring it down.
But retail sales slowed last month for the first time this year, including a 4% drop in car sales. Americans have begun pulling back on spending, especially on services rather than goods. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers says all signs point to a recession.
The dominant probability would be that by the end of next year, we would be seeing a recession in the American economy.
Record fuel prices are another major inflationary pressure reverberating through the economy. While Yellen says the administration would consider suspending the federal gas tax, about 18 cents a gallon, that would not make a huge difference.
Next time you go to the grocery store, the hardware store, you buy something online, you're going to pay for it. Or I should say you're going to pay much more for it, given the fact that diesel prices now are approaching $6 a gallon for a national average.
But the biggest reason by far for inflation, according to analyst Joel Griffith, has been runaway government spending.
Look, we spent around $6 trillion extra over the past 2 years than we normally spent, and nearly every last dollar of that was printed by the Fed and used to purchase government debt. That's why we have inflation right now.
One thing economists seem to agree on, there will be no easy way out of this economic mess. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And there won't be any easy way out. And for average Americans, we're all feeling the pain. You just fill up your tank at the gas station and you go, ouch. Every price I'm experiencing has gone up, and you just look at it and go, well, I need to cut back on my spending. I need to, really reduce what I'm spending money on, because there seems to be a whole lot more month right now than there is money to go around. And that will lead to a recession. I really don't care what economists say, that half of them say yes, half of them say no. There's another poll out that says that 60% of CEOs are predicting a recession. What does that mean? That means less investment. You're not going to take a risk. You're not going to go out there and establish new product lines. You're not going to invest in new plants. You're not going to do those things that normally grow an economy because you think a recession is coming. Inflation is absolutely going to kill the consumer. You have to pull back on your spending. You don't want to go into debt. And with that will mean less money floating through the economy. That always leads to some kind of a recession. So will it be this year? Will it be next year? Larry Summers is predicting at the end of next year. Now, what do you and I do? Number one, please don't get into the temptation of using a credit card thinking this is somehow going to go away. You're just going to make the problem worse. Credit card interest is already at 20% for some cards. That's not going down. And when you have that kind of interest rate on credit card debt, you're digging a hole you really can't get out of. So please don't use credit cards. If you're in adjustable rate mortgages, realize in that adjustment time, the Federal Reserve is absolutely raising interest rates. So what will that adjustment be? And please protect yourself from that kind of future where your mortgage payment is going to go way up. Well, in other news, a new poll shows the January 6th hearings may be having an impact. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. About 58% of Americans believe former President Trump should face criminal charges related to the Capitol attack. That is according to a new ABC Ipsos survey, and that's up 6% from a similar poll back in April. The committee has held 3 public hearings this month, the most recent focusing on the disagreement between Vice President Mike Pence and President Trump over what authority Pence actually had. Greg Jacob, former general counsel to the vice president, said Trump's team was relying on a legal strategy that proposed the vice president could either reject slates of electors or send them back to the states for reconsideration. Vice President Pence calling those strategies unconstitutional. Witnesses testified Pence told Trump this many times, including in a heated phone call before the January 6th rally.
I remember hearing the word wimp. Either he called him a wimp. I don't remember if he said, you are a wimp, you'll be a wimp. Wimp is the word I remember.
It's also been reported that the president said to the vice president that something to the effect of, you don't have the courage to make a hard decision.
Worse, I don't remember exactly either, but something like that, yeah. You're not tough enough to make the call.
It was a different tone than I'd heard him take with the vice president before.
Speaking at the Faith and Freedom Coalition Friday, Trump said he only wanted Pence to send the votes back to the state legislatures, and he denied calling the vice president a wimp.
But I never called Mike Pence a wimp. I never called him a wimp. Mike Pence had a chance to be great. He had a chance to be, frankly, historic. But just like Bill Barr and the rest of these weak people, Mike, and I say it sadly because I like him, but Mike did not have the courage to act.
The committee's next public hearing is this Tuesday. Well, a major development in the controversy over transgender athletes in women's sports. The governing body for World Swimming effectively has banned trans women from competing in women's events starting today. The members widely adopted a new policy Sunday that only permits swimmers who transition their genders before age 12 to compete alongside other women. The body also proposed a new open competition category, which a commission will draft guidelines for later. Well, turning now to the war in Ukraine, NATO's Secretary General warns the fighting could go on there for years and that the West should be prepared to continue supporting the Ukrainian government in its efforts to push Russia out of the country. Jens Stoltenberg said the long-term costs may be high, but the risk of letting Russia achieve a military victory is a greater gamble. The NATO chief also called for more weapons to Ukraine to help liberate eastern territories from Russian forces. Well, volunteers from around the world are coming to the aid of Ukrainians who fled the fighting. In Poland, a team from CBN's Operation Blessing helped provide supplies to a woman who opened her home to more than 50 refugees. CBN's Lucille Toulousan reports from Poland.
Anna Ponomazenko shares how difficult it was to leave her husband and son before crossing the border to Poland.
We were all crying. My husband was crying, but the Russians were shooting, so we had to leave fast.
They left because their hometown is now occupied by the Russians.
I decided to flee Ukraine because many children are being abused by Russian soldiers. Many children also lost their arms and limbs in the bombing. My husband and oldest son are left in our house to guard it against the looting by the Russian soldiers. I miss the times when we were happy, just being together as a family.
Anna, her teenage daughter, and 2 boys now live with 15 families in this shelter. Alexandra told CBN News that just a few hours after they arrived in the shelter, they received the horrible news that their house in Kharkiv was bombed.
It is really very sad when I think that we don't have our house to go back to in Ukraine. I realized that life is too short and that we should make the most out of it.
I want Russia to stop this war.
Me too. I want Russia to stop this war and I want to come to my home, meet up with my friends and my family. I want them to be alive.
Many refugees have returned to Ukraine to stay with family members who live far from the war zone. But there's still a big number of them who live in shelters here in Poland. Some of these shelters are owned by private individuals like Maria Mroczkowska, who opened her home to 52 refugees.
When I lost my husband last year, I was so depressed and I was advised to travel and take a vacation. But when the war broke out, I decided to use my money to help the refugees.
Maria provided comfortable beds and used her resources to feed them. Soon, her supplies began to run out. When Operation Blessing learned about her needs, they brought her much-needed food like pasta, rice, canned goods, cooking oil, flour, hygiene, and cleaning supplies. Obi also helped other shelters like the one helping Anna, Veronica, and Alexandra.
I feel more inspired when people from different countries come to help. Thank you for all that you do.
Lucille Talusan, CBN News, Rzeszów, Poland.
Demonstrating some real and tangible ways to love thy neighbor. Gordon?
It's wonderful. Just when you're starting to give up hope on the human race, here comes Maria saying, I'm a widow, but I'll use my money to open my home to 52 strangers because I want to take care of them in their time of need. What a wonderful expression. What a wonderful example for all of us. If you want to help people like Maria provide for refugees, there's a very easy way to do it. Join the 700 Club. A portion of every gift goes into the work of Operation Blessing, and we're distributing food, we're distributing supplies. We have a whole warehouse facility in Poland. We have numerous centers that Orphans Promise has established that have been there for 20 years. We're not brand new to this. We've been in Ukraine for a very long period of time. We're increasing our activity in Poland to help the flood of refugees there, but there's a map showing all the different centers, and it's all made possible because people like you care enough to give. So if you'd like to, be a part of it. 1-800-700-7000. Just say, I want to join the 700 Club. It's just $20 a month, 65 cents a day.